We got to talk about what's going on with the Earth and the relationship to the Sun, because things do seem to be heating up. Although I have a friend who says the Antarctic ice sheet is increasing, so I don't know how these two things can be true. Because I also hear that the Arctic Circle, the ice up there, is melting. Now, how can these things be going on at the same time unless the South Pole, somehow the sun has gone away from the South Pole. Now, people say by observations at nighttime, when you look at the stars, that the North Pole is still directly over the North Pole. So that means the Earth, in relation to this backdrop of the stars, hasn't changed. So the Earth is the same, the Earth is stable. But what about the sun? How do we know that the sun's not moving further away or further back? But I think it seems to be moving further upwards. See, my issue is with, when I do research, I'm not sure which way the solar system is moving. Because obviously, there's a question about the total movement of things. You got to know about astronomy, see, to really follow what I'm saying. I'm putting it to you with amateur layman's terms, but I'm also telling you these are very technical matters that science has to experiment with. It's very heady stuff. This is like you need to be rocket science here. When we talk about movements, there's always multiple movements within movements. Just a simple way of looking at it, every one of the planets has a revolution around the sun. If you want to look at it that way, that's they move from the Copernican to the Galilean model, the geocentric to the heliocentric, and basically they have a 3D static model which shows movement around a plane, relatively level plane, except for Pluto. Pluto is very eccentric. I think it's a 17-degree eccentricity to that plane, so it intersects it instead of being parallel with that plane. All the other planets are relatively close, like the Earth, Venus, Mars. But which way is that thing going? So if you look at it as the sun in the center and a disk, which way is that going? Is it going side to side, somewhere in the galaxy, or the local group, local star cluster? Or is it going up, which would be north, because we always, sorry if you're in Australia, down under. But that's the way they do the maps, because most of the people live in the northern hemisphere, and we want to look at it that way since our heads are here and our feet are down here. It's anthropomorphic. So south would be down. So if it's under the southern part, the other direction of the heliocentric plane would be moving that way. Or is it going at an angle, in 3 dimensions? Don't even talk about 4 dimensions, 5 dimensions, this and that. It's just, that's too complicated. So people are disputing me when I put out my doubt about, I observe where the sun comes up and where it goes down, and how high it is at its azimuth and the zenith of the sun during the solstice. Last year, just more than a year ago, I noticed that it's around 2 degrees off kilter. And I am in the northern hemisphere barely, and at the Tropic of Cancer, you see that the sun is too far north. How can it be too far north? Is that so? Has the sun risen up out of the plane, and that the planets have dropped back? At least the Earth in its revolutionary orbit, the revolution and its tilt of like 23 degrees approximately, pointing over to, and that's the polar axis. That's that's axis, which creates the nodes. That's not, we're at 0 degrees ecliptic, but it's a 23 degrees off of the perpendicular spinning axis. That's rotational axis, okay? There's revolution, there's rotation. See, it's going to get very visual. You have to have a mind for this. I love this stuff. I just put it in my mind's eye. It's like exciting. Then you've got the moon too, and the moon definitely, even if everything is the way it's always been, the moon always seems to be off kilter, and you got people really like making a big deal out of the supermoon. We just had the supermoon, by the way, about 2 months ago, not about a month and a half. But that doesn't mean much. That just means the moon was close as it's going to get during the full moon, because it ebbs and flows. It has like a discrepancy of distance. It's not always the same distance because the orbit is not circular. And in fact, the moon is orbiting around something else, not the Earth. It's orbiting around something. It's a spatial point. It's a different center. It does not orbit around the center of the Earth. It's actually a point just underneath the surface. Very interesting if you know, you're smart enough to know the implications of that. Churning, gravity churning. So here's the concern. Like, if the system is changing, we already have a lot of evidence because observations seem to be off. But these are amateurs such as myself doing it. I can't measure it exactly. I don't have the high-tech instruments. But I think it's a few degrees off. Which, if the sun did rise up in the solar system plane and it came up, that would make the Antarctic more cold. So we've got to think about places down there like Patagonia, Tasmania, and New Zealand. Those are the places that are furthest south, closer to Antarctica. Are these places getting more severely cold? Like, it's winter now in those places. Those 3 places I just mentioned. And there's a few other islands, but I don't even know if they watch my channel. But if you're from one of those 3 places, even Australia, like southern Australia, would you tell me if you feel like the winter is getting more severe, it's more cold? Tell me if you noticed that over the past couple of years. We have storms that are unusual because the jet stream seems to be slowing down, and we know that the Gulf Stream is having problems. There was a guy who made this huge exaggeration that the Gulf Stream, as it came through the Florida Straits and shot up past the Sargasso Sea and up the East Coast and headed across toward Europe and England, he was saying that it's going to shut down altogether. That this current, this conveyor belt of ocean energy and heat, that this is going to be shut off. And the problem in the Gulf oil spill was part of it. And the methane building up and those sinkholes in Louisiana is all connected. Now, the Gulf of Mexico is a precious place on the earth, and we don't quite understand. I asked somebody and they didn't give me any answer. Again, I don't know if they just went over their head, but how old is the Gulf of Mexico? How old is that strata underneath the water? Because I know from doing research, and here's more factoids that you need to plug into your machine, your think tank, put on your thinking cap. The oldest bodies of water are the Mediterranean and off the continental shelf of the east coast of America, United States, and off to the east of Japan, China, all those islands out there, and the Philippines. That's a huge area that's very old, and possibly up underneath the Arctic ice. Okay, so those several places that I mentioned, 3 places, but one of the 4th place is the Gulf of Mexico. I don't have a lot of information about that, how old it is. The age of the seafloor underneath all the water is over 225 million years. It has been there, exposed, not covered over by any other strata. It is that old. The rock has been there, the underneath, and it's got sediment and everything that settles from, flowing from rivers and dead animal material and dead human material, whatever drops into the ocean. But underneath all of that, before it gets compressed, which it really takes a long time to do so, but underneath that, you're talking over 225 million years, possibly. I don't know if you want to stretch it to 250 million by the carbon dating methods, the best methods that science has, if you want to believe that it's accurate. But I mean, to me, it's all relative. If you say something is 1 million years ago, and then you say something's 250 million years, it seems to me, if it's a steady rate, that means it's just 250 times as old, even if 1 million is just 1,000 years, or even if 1 million is just 1 year. That means the first example is 1 year old, and the next example is 250 years old. I just take it as relative, okay? That's the safest way, even if they're not. It has something to do with radioactive decay of the material, of the different elements. Don't even get me going about radiation. I'm not talking about Fukushima here, but we should, because that's another life killer. Possibly that has something to do with raising the temperature of the Earth. Now we've got these storms. Someone was making a big deal out of them before it's news.com, saying that there's a storm that's moving backwards. Because usually in the United States you got stuff that comes to the West Coast, California first, and it just drifts across and leaves by way of the Northeast usually, because of the traveling of the jet stream. But it's not always the case. So this person's just saying, oh, the storm is going backwards. Well, yeah, you ever see a hurricane come in off the Caribbean or the Atlantic? It comes in from the east and it usually plows north, but to the west a little bit. Katrina did that. Hurricane Sandy did that. It was almost due north but slightly west. Like it actually took a hook, a right angle. I don't know how that it does that, but people are talking about HAARP. So there's a lot of things. I'm throwing things from every different discipline. I'm interdisciplinary here, folks, because we have to figure out what's going on. Our technology is affecting things. There's human intervention going on, and not all of it good. Much of it is malicious. It's the military and the governments. Be suspicious, folks. A lot of it could do with the solar system. We really can't do much about that. If it's the sun behaving a certain way and actually moving out of its place in our system, get ready for a wild ride. If it's the magnetosphere, because somehow our magnetic poles are ebbing and flowing, which we have evidence for, then get ready for another wild ride, especially if we have a physical pole shift. That means everything's going to get destroyed. That means the water is going to be displaced. That means we're going to have tsunamis of unimaginable proportion. But don't let me scare you, because, again, there's not much we can do if that happens. So you have to turn to your faith, and you have to realize there must be a higher power. We must be given life from some loving, protective creator. And with that, I conclude this talk on what's going on, things to ponder, things to research. Keep your mind open. Please discuss, make your comments, share this with all your friends, favorite this in your playlist, thumbs up, and make sure you're subscribed.